So welcome back. We are doing a deep dive into the topic of boundaries. I recommend that you visit SurvivorSupport.net under the podcast tab to review previous podcasts to give you context for what we're talking about tonight, because without that context, you may find that what we're about to look at, once I find it, is a little harsh. Because as you look at, let me see if I can do this again. This time I'll technologically do it properly. There we are. We've been looking at the issue of boundaries and making sure there is goodness of fit within boundaries. Because if I allow somebody into my life or allow them access into my heart of hearts, where I trust them at a level 10, assuming that because they are family, let me give you that slide. So assuming that they are family, you can see structurally and functionally what level family typically is at as far as, let's say, legally or in the typical scope of things in society. You can see where family is. They have a natural into someone's life. But unfortunately, if certain families or parents don't abide by the prescriptions of leaving and cleaving and allowing to leave and cleave, then what happens is they can presume that they have access into my heart of hearts. But there's a big difference, or into the circle, increasing circles of intimacy, when in reality they may not. So just because, and we've heard the phrase that you can choose your friends but you can't choose your family. Well, I'm here to tell you that is not true. Now, genetically, are you related to your family? Of course, but that's where things end. Usually, if a parent is honorable, and we're to give honor to those to whom honor is due, yes, little children are to obey their parents. In the normal course of things, if a parent has acted honorably, you will find that they will naturally be closer than most people in those concentric circles. But if a parent has not acted honorably, they can actually find themselves, they will be, and therefore we will match in terms of goodness of fit. You can have a parent that is a -9 or a -10. And they are not due automatically to be able to be in the inner circle of intimacy. And that's where needing to have boundaries that have, as it were, goodness of fit come in. Because if I allow someone, by virtue of blood relations, if I allow them, even though they're at the far extreme end of that continuum right there, that now my picture is covering, if they're outside, if they're in the negative, the question is, why would I allow them in to the positive areas when they haven't demonstrated that? What's going to happen if I do? Well, I will be inviting, as we saw before, I will be inviting a pig, a progressive pig, into my life. And so psychology comes along and calls a pig, an old-fashioned pig, calls it a couple different things. It's progressive, narcissist, who will then grow into a sociopath and eventually a white-collar psychopath. That's just a fancy way of saying someone without a conscience, if decreasingly so because they violate their conscience. If you violate your conscience long enough, then you begin to not feel sorry, so you lack remorse. And you're not really all that concerned that you're having a negative impact upon someone, so lack of empathy. Those are the three characteristics of psychopathy, and it really is best viewed on a continuum. So prior to the break, or if you're watching part 2 of this, we were looking at this chart. I'm going to get rid of there we go. Get rid of my picture there. So if you are someone who has the character qualities, as a matter of fact, let me bring those back up. So if you have these kind of character qualities where you are very thoughtful of someone and you think beforehand. So you have forethought, you're intentional as far as being kind. We can almost look at the Boy Scout law or oath. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Those would all be a level 9 or 10 kind of person. So that is someone who puts thought ahead of time into your relationship, someone that is very intentional, somebody who's purposeful, someone who is strategically beneficial. That means who genuinely is looking out for your best interest. Someone who responds without question if you need help. Why? Because, number one, you typically won't be asking for help. Those who are in the good category never want to presume. As a matter of fact, that's probably a downside. Right? It's hard to ask for help. So when somebody finally asks for help, what happens? A true friend, they'll be there. They won't even ask questions. They're there. And like the song of the 60s, like a bridge over troubled waters, they will lay themselves down. That's a true friend. But when someone becomes increasingly selfish, they morph into, strangely enough, similar type of purposefulness, but it's all towards self. So they are very intentional. The more selfish they become, the more intentional they are at ensuring that they get what they want. They're very purposeful. How do you find out? You start implementing boundaries and you'll find out how purposeful, because what will they do with your boundaries? They will try to make sure you don't have them. They will try to make sure that your no does not mean no. And that's why before you ever attempt to set boundaries with someone, you have to make sure that you do not need anything from them. Do not try to set boundaries prematurely. What do I mean? What do I mean by prematurely? Do not try to set boundaries out of your hurt or too soon when you have not gone through the grief and loss process, which happens to involve anger. You need to go through all of that away from that person, so by the time you are setting boundaries with that person, you can simply fulfill the actual working definition of confrontation. What is that? To place in front of, without a lot of emotion or drama. The selfish pig, who's intentional and purposeful, is not going to stand for that one way or the other, and they will start to push back, meaning that you're pushing your boundaries out and they will push back. What? They don't want you to reestablish your property line. That's based upon respect, your own value and respect. They do not want to respect you the way you are due respect. They don't want to value you the way God values you. They don't want to treat you the way God wants you to be treated. And so by you reestablishing your boundaries, you are changing the dynamics in the relationship where you're letting them know you can't be selfish anymore. Well, by the time somebody gets down to about a -4, that change is pretty darn permanent. Why? Because between -3 and -4, certainly into -5, something is happening within their heart of hearts, the selfish person. Selfishness is growing. They're losing the value of their conscience. They're losing the effectiveness of their conscience. Why? Because they have been overriding their conscience. They've been justifying and rationalizing. They have not been responding to their conscience properly, so they are becoming callous to their conscience. The conscience has to dial it up in terms of volume, so it's knocking louder and louder, and they're not responding. And you can get to a point where you violate your conscience long enough, and you won't really hear it anymore. And then you can get to a point, and here's the scary thing, and from a biblical perspective, if somebody comes from that perspective, the term the fear of the Lord entails this process, because the more selfish I am becoming, let me bring my full picture back up. No, I'm sorry. You know what? I'll just keep that. Okay, so the more I descend into selfishness, the more I morph into a selfish person, the easier it becomes. And so as I become increasingly selfish, I'm becoming increasingly hurtful. I am negatively impacting you more and more. And the smarter I am, the less overt it's going to be. The more I'm going to play you, the more I'm going to work you. How am I going to do that? Guilt is a tremendous thing. So if you do not have boundaries with me, or if I'm becoming increasingly selfish and you don't set boundaries, then I will continue, like Paul says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 19 and 20, that the selfish person or the fool will start incrementally. They'll get their foot in the door. They'll start to take control. They'll take advantage, and then they become increasingly disrespectful and then abusive. Jesus said, do not cast your pearls before swine. Why? Because they will take your pearls, which are your time, effort, energy, resources, everything about you, and they will disrespect them. They'll devalue them. That would be bad enough. But then they will add insult to injury or injury to insult. So they'll trample your pearls. They don't value them anymore. And they will do what? They will turn on you in one way or another. Now you become theirs. That becomes the new norm. So you'll have a relationship with them as long as you keep doing all the giving and all the tolerating and putting up with. So by the time somebody reaches about -4, certainly into -5, and then really into -6, but it's probably about -5, there's a twisting process that takes place in their heart and in their mind, to where they lose the desire to be any other way than they are, and they like it that way. That's the judgment. The thing they don't recognize is this. They don't recognize that there is a God, because they've said in their heart of hearts what? That there's no God. Now, do they have to verbalize that? No. But do they believe they're going to be held accountable? No. Once you reach that point where you don't believe you're going to be called to give an account for how you treat other people, then you're sort of a God in your own life. You're going to call the shots. You're going to sing the Frank Sinatra song, I Did It My Way. You're going to repeat the poem Evictus, where you are the captain of your ship, the master of your soul. No one's going to tell you what to do. Why? Because you're setting the ground rules. You become the shot caller. You become the top dog. Boss bow wow, as they say sometimes in different cultures. So nobody's going to tell you what to do. So you continue to give yourself license and permission to become more and more selfish and to override people's boundaries, which means you are disrespectful and you're hurtful. Then you are piling judgment upon yourself, and you don't know it by that time. And here it is, you don't care, because you don't believe it. And if someone were to ask you, let's say if you're a selfish person, right, the more selfish you become, you have no interest in not being selfish anymore. Why? Because it's not a value to you. As a matter of fact, the term Boy Scout in prison is a derogatory term. How many times did I hear different inmates say, you're such a Boy Scout? Right? So let's review what a Boy Scout is. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. Oh, that's horrible. Wouldn't you hate to have somebody in your life that's trustworthy, loyal? And so they begin to view the opposite end of the continuum. So I'll bring it back again. Right? They begin to look at those upper character qualities as being disdainful. So we could list, as a matter of fact, let me bring another chart that I have. They begin to look at these character qualities. There we are. With disdain on top of this chart. So somebody that's truthful, they think is a putz. Somebody that's kind, that's a putz for sure. Trustworthy, oh my gosh, right? We need to get over on that person. We hate somebody that's trustworthy. Meaning if you're way down on the bottom of this continuum, you hate trustworthy people. Thoughtful, you'll take advantage of that person. And loyal, actually, how many selfish men that betray their wives, or it could be anybody, but how many loyal spouses find that they've been betrayed? Why? Because the person that betrayed them did what? Took advantage of their loyalty. And as far as sacrificial, that's all somebody needs. Somebody who is down on the selfish end of the continuum, that's all they need to take your pearls. So if you are lacking boundaries, then you are lacking the ability to preserve what is most important and most valuable. And so you'll find that you are constantly frustrated. Why? Because you're dealing with someone that is at a lower level on the continuum, and you are assuming they're going to behave themselves. You're assuming they're going to value you. You're assuming they're going to keep their word. You assume that this time at Thanksgiving, it's going to go well, that they're going to check the words that come out of their mouth, that they're not going to treat you the way they always have. Why are you assuming that? Where's that coming from? That's not grounded in reality, because you look at how every Thanksgiving has gone or every Christmas and what's it been like. We showed a clip of Jane Fonda talking about her father, Henry Fonda, in the movie On Golden Pond. They were actually father-daughter, and they played father-daughter. And Jane Fonda talked about how she was triggered by her dad. Why? Because her dad treated her as young, meaning as naive and stupid, and that she never quite was with it and got it. Well, that triggered her actually on the set, so she was able to act. But if you go and watch that film, the intensity is not just acting. And then she made a statement, which is actually, sadly, not all that accurate. She approached Katharine Hepburn and she said, why do I allow him to do that to me? And Katharine Hepburn's response was, well, they just don't know. Really? No, they know. And that's why they don't stop. If you don't think they know, then good. There's one easy way to find out, isn't there? Mention it to them and see what happens. Mention to them the effect they're having on you and see their response. If they become broken and contrite, then you know, okay, you can move their arrow right up to the positive. But if they mock you or demean you or tell you you're overly sensitive, who does that? Somebody that is down in the minus category. So if you deal with someone who's down in the minus category, you invite pain. So if you are thinking, for instance, of getting together with someone over the holidays, and if you were to rank them, go back and listen to some previous podcasts such as How Big of a Pig and the Warthog Assessment. As a matter of fact, I would recommend everybody take the Warthog Assessment for themselves, but also thinking in terms of who you're going to be around come the holidays. And if you find there are going to be people around you, around that Christmas table or somewhere in close proximity that's in that minus category, then you risk going against what Jesus said, which is do not cast your pearls before swine. Certainly do not expect anything other than a pig to act like a pig. Why? Because if you think they're going to be different this time, you will invite pain. Now I'm back to the chart there. Why do you continue to do that? Could it be that you are motivated by fear? Well, 1 John talks about perfect love casts out all fear. If you truly have a loving relationship with that person, you should be able to speak the truth in love. You should be able to do iron sharpening iron. But if you can't, then you are being held back by fear. And that is not a loving relationship. That's not a true relationship. In fact, then you are evidencing, because you are going to allow yourself to be disrespected, devalued. You're going to allow yourself to be dumped on. We looked at that in the past. You're going to be allowing someone to treat you in a disrespectful, hurtful fashion. You're going to allow someone to oppress you. You're going to allow someone to take their knapsack and put it on you, their responsibility, and put it on you. That is poor stewardship. And that's if you're single. But if you're married and or if you have kids, when you're around that kind of person, so looking at the chart again, anytime you're around that bottom arrow kind of person, what happens to you? When you walk away, or certainly when you're with them, but when you walk away, when you drive away, what do you like to be around? What's your mood like? You're either going to be depressed, and so now you take time, effort, energy, and resources away from the people that truly do matter. So in a way, you're kind of stealing time from them. So you took time away from the people that really did matter. You took energy, because if you have to recover, that means you're not emotionally available for the people that really do matter. You're not there for your wife. You're not there for your husband. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to go into a depression. So people have to tippy-toe around now to make sure mom or dad's okay. You're probably going to eat or drink. You're going to change whatever was going to be a good time for the kids and your spouse. What happens now? And how many years has that gone on? How many Christmases? It start out okay, but you know you're going to get a phone call from who? That certain person. And what happens? And then mom or dad, they're all bummed out and the kids feel it. And so you are forcing them, you're causing the people that count on you to starve emotionally because you're taking the good stuff and giving it to who? The selfish pig. And Jesus told you not to. Solomon tells you in Proverbs chapter 26, 27, and 28, do not do that. Paul told you, do not deal with a fool. And so we deal with these people and we expect a different outcome. That's denial and craziness. And we think somehow it's going to be different this time. And all we're doing is enabling oppression. We allow it to continue. There are never any consequences. If I do not set limits, then how long will this craziness be going on? And how many people in one family can be in the negative? Think about Cinderella. Cinderella was up at the 9 or 10, and the wicked stepmother and stepsisters were where? How about Rapunzel's mother? What number? How about in Carol Burnett? We watched that. We saw some clips from Carol Burnett. Anyway, how about Mama? Oh, that's interesting. What number would you give Mama? Okay, maybe not, if this was a dynamic chart, I could move the arrows, but it's very interesting to think in terms of what number are people at. And if I'm not treating people at the level they're at, then I'm giving a false sense of what is when it's really not. And so ultimately the selfish person will benefit. Why? Because they're not coming up. They're pulling me down. They're causing me angst. Now, here's a question for you. When you think in terms of you, okay, I'm going to get rid of me here. Let me get rid of my picture here. Okay. What is the difference between guilt and shame? Because if you're in a relationship with someone who is a pig, you will inevitably feel guilty. And so the difference between true guilt and shame is simply this. True guilt is the result of something you've done. So I'm going to remove me now. Again, look it over on the right. If you are a selfish person, so you're down there somewhere, and you're dealing with someone that is up there, someone that has the traits of a Boy Scout, someone that has good character qualities, and if you are taking advantage of them, if you are disrespecting them, so again, now it's flip-flopped. So we've been talking about somebody negatively impacting you, but look on the right side of this chart. True guilt is when they are interacting with you and you're not honest with them. And what's going to happen? You're going to end up taking from them. Now, the majority of people that listen to this podcast are not over on the right-hand side. But if you have been selfish and you've treated somebody poorly, then Matthew 5 says, leave your gift at the altar and you go make amends. You go apologize. Why? Because you have been hurtful. When you are disrespectful, when you devalue someone, when you take their time, effort, energy, and resources, and I'll tell you who does that a lot, sometimes are pastors and church leaders. Now I just got myself in trouble, huh? Right? So if you take advantage of people, now, am I going to say that every pastor is down there? No. But the question is this. Let's say I am draining someone of their time. You could have certain pastors that are a -2 or -3. God's still working on them or through them, but you know what? They're going to have to answer for a lot of stuff because they've been piling on guilt. They've been sucking the daylights out of people. They have been discouraging rather than encouraging. So if you're in a position of church leadership and you are not thoughtful of people's time, effort, energy, and resources, and you're trying to use them to save you time, effort, energy, and resources, then you are manipulating them. Do not do that. The Lord will hold you accountable. Do not do that. Okay? Now, dealing with false guilt, or what's called shame. There is a true sense of shame that's used biblically, but we're going to use it as a typical sense now as far as false guilt. False guilt is you feeling guilty for something that you haven't done, that you are not responsible for, and that's why you can't do anything about it. If it's true guilt, then you can do something about it. You can repent. You can, like in 1 John 1:9, you can confess your sin. That means to say the exact same thing as somebody else. You can go make it right. But if you haven't done anything, then what's happening is you're over on the left, where you have a selfish person that's making you feel guilty, where it's they themselves are the ones that are actually guilty. They're guilty of manipulating you. They're guilty of taking your pearls, your time, effort, energy, resources, everything about you, and treating them as nothing, disrespecting you. But who ends up feeling guilty when you put boundaries up? Or if they keep you in that, it looks like right here that you are higher than them. It's true. But in interacting with them, what do? You are in a one down position. So they keep dumping on you. That's why, meaning by taking advantage or disrespecting you. They're the dumpor, you become the dumpee. That is a recipe for anxiety, frustration, and depression. We're going to continue to look at what happens in that dynamic unless you make a change. We have to take care of ourselves. Why? Because we're important. We're important to God. We will continue in this series on the next edition of Journey to Healing.
You've been listening to Journey to Healing, sponsored by SurvivorSupport.net. We trust you've been helped by the information our host, John Euler, has shared. To donate to this ministry, schedule a personal consultation with John, or to arrange a professional training for your church or organization with John, simply visit our website. On behalf of Survivor Support, we look forward to hearing from you and to have you join us next time on Journey to Healing.